By 1775, the interior of Kentucky lay beyond established colonial lines, a contested frontier where surveyors, hunters, and land speculators moved along ancient trails, approaching the rich limestone basin that would later support the settlement known as Lexington. Early expeditions followed buffalo traces through dense forests, guided by geographic features including the Elkhorn Creek and surrounding bluegrass plains, whose fertile soils derived from limestone bedrock offered exceptional grazing conditions and encouraged the establishment of small, fortified camps. Named after the opening battles of the American Revolution, the camp at Lexington was established in June 1775 by militia surveyors seeking claims under Virginia authority, reflecting the extension of colonial governance into western territories contested by native nations. Initial construction consisted of log cabins arranged defensively, with blockhouses positioned to monitor approaches, as settlers balanced agricultural ambitions with persistent security concerns, aware that the region remained a zone of ongoing conflict during the broader Revolutionary War period. Relations with indigenous groups, particularly Shawnee communities, fluctuated between trade and hostility, influenced by competing land claims and shifting alliances, culminating in cycles of raids and reprisals that shaped settlement patterns and reinforced the necessity of collective defense structures. The geographic position of Lexington within the inner bluegrass region provided natural advantages, including reliable water sources and nutrient-rich pastures, enabling settlers to develop livestock-based agriculture that would become a defining economic characteristic of the area in subsequent decades. During the late 1770s, the settlement experienced intermittent abandonment as violence intensified, yet returning inhabitants demonstrated persistence, reconstructing dwellings and expanding cleared land, signaling a commitment to permanence despite unstable frontier conditions and limited institutional support from distant authorities. By 1780, Lexington had transitioned from a fortified camp into a small town, serving as a regional administrative center within newly formed Fayette County, reflecting Virginia's efforts to formalize governance and impose legal structures across its western district. The end of the Revolutionary War reduced immediate military threats, allowing population growth through migration from eastern states, as families sought arable land, contributing to a steady expansion of farms, local roads, and civic institutions within the developing settlement. Lexington's early economy relied heavily on subsistence farming supplemented by trade in livestock, particularly horses, which thrived in bluegrass pastures, establishing patterns of production and exchange that increasingly linked the town to regional markets and encouraged specialized breeding practices. Religious and educational institutions began to emerge in the 1780s, including academies and churches, which provided social cohesion and reflected settlers' intentions to establish structured communities, reinforcing norms derived from Eastern American society while adapting to frontier realities. In 1787, the founding of Transylvania Seminary, later university, marked a significant intellectual development, positioning Lexington as an educational center in the Western Territories and attracting scholars, students, and clergy who contributed to the town's cultural and institutional growth. Political organization advanced as Kentucky separated from Virginia and achieved statehood in 1792, with Lexington functioning as a regional hub, influencing legislative discussions, legal practices, and economic coordination within the newly formed state structure during its formative early years. The transition to statehood altered governance structures, reducing reliance on distant authorities and enabling local leadership to address infrastructure, taxation, and land disputes more directly, shaping a political culture that balanced frontier independence with emerging state institutions new. By the early 19th century, Lexington had developed into one of the largest towns west of the Appalachian Mountains, with improved roads connecting it to surrounding settlements, facilitating trade flows and reinforcing its role as a commercial and administrative center. The growth of horse breeding and agricultural production generated wealth, encouraging the emergence of a local elite whose influence extended into politics and education, shaping social hierarchies that reflected economic success and inherited traditions carried from older states. Enslaved labor formed a significant component of the agricultural system, particularly on larger farms, embedding social inequalities into the region's development and linking Lexington's economy to broader patterns of slavery in the American South during this regional period. Urban development included the construction of brick buildings, courthouses, and market spaces, indicating increasing stability and investment, while also reflecting the availability of skilled labor and materials as transportation networks gradually improved across central Kentucky during this period overall. Lexington's role as a regional center fostered connections with other towns, promoting exchange of goods, ideas, and legal practices, thereby integrating the settlement into a wider economic and administrative network that extended throughout the early state of Kentucky. New population growth also introduced social tensions, including class distinctions and differing political views, as new migrants brought varied expectations, contributing to debates over governance, land ownership, and economic priorities within the evolving community structure during these formative years. By 1820, Lexington had established enduring institutional frameworks, including courts, schools, and markets, which structured daily life and reinforced its position within Kentucky's internal hierarchy, demonstrating a clear transition from frontier outpost to an organized urban center overall development. The long-term trajectory of Lexington during this period reveals patterns of geographic advantage, economic specialization, and institutional development that would continue shaping its role within the region, illustrating how early frontier conditions produced durable structures influencing subsequent generations. Following statehood in 1792, Lexington entered a phase of accelerated consolidation, as administrative functions expanded and the town's role within Kentucky became more clearly defined, supported by its central location within the fertile inner bluegrass agricultural region. The surrounding geography continued to influence settlement density, with gently rolling terrain and accessible waterways enabling efficient movement of goods, while the limestone-rich soil sustained high-yield pastures, reinforcing the area's specialization in livestock and agricultural production. Road development became a priority during the 1790s, as local authorities and private investors improved connections between Lexington and surrounding counties, facilitating trade and communication while reducing isolation that had previously characterized frontier communities in central Kentucky. Economic activity diversified gradually, with artisans, merchants, and mill operators establishing businesses that supported both rural farmers and urban residents, creating a more complex local economy that extended beyond subsistence and into structured commercial exchange systems. Lexington's market spaces became focal points for regional trade, where agricultural goods, livestock, and imported items were exchanged, reflecting increasing integration into broader economic networks that linked Kentucky to eastern markets through overland routes and river transport systems. The rise of hemp cultivation during this period contributed significantly to economic growth, as the crop's utility and rope and textile production created demand, encouraging farmers to allocate land toward commercial agriculture rather than purely subsistence practices. This shift toward market-oriented farming altered labor patterns, increasing reliance on enslaved workers in certain sectors, particularly on larger farms, thereby deepening the entrenchment of slavery within the region's economic and social framework during the early 19th century. Educational institutions expanded their influence, with Transylvania University developing into a prominent center of learning, attracting students from across the Western territories and contributing to the intellectual life of Lexington and its surrounding communities. The presence of educated professionals, including lawyers, physicians, and clergy, reinforced Lexington's status as a cultural and administrative hub, shaping civic discourse and contributing to the development of legal and institutional norms within the young state. Printing presses and newspapers began operating in Lexington, disseminating political ideas, commercial information, and public notices, thereby enhancing communication and fostering a more informed population engaged in local and regional affairs during this period. Political life in Lexington reflected broader national developments, including debates over federal authority and economic policy, as residents participated in elections and public discussions that shaped Kentucky's position within the expanding United States. The town's leadership played a role in advocating for internal improvements, including better roads and navigation systems, recognizing that infrastructure development was essential for sustaining economic growth and maintaining Lexington's regional prominence. Social structures became more defined as wealth accumulated among certain families, leading to distinctions in status and influence, while smaller farmers and laborers navigated changing economic conditions that increasingly favored capital investment and land ownership. Religious institutions continued to grow, with various denominations establishing congregations, contributing to community cohesion while also reflecting diverse theological perspectives brought by migrants from different parts of the United States. Urban planning began to take more formal shape, with streets laid out systematically and public buildings constructed with greater permanence, indicating a shift from improvised frontier settlement to a structured town with long-term developmental planning. Lexington's geographic position remained central to its success, acting as a crossroads within Kentucky, where routes from eastern settlements converged with paths leading toward the Ohio River, enabling efficient distribution of goods and movement of people. The development of horse breeding into a specialized industry further distinguished Lexington's economy, as breeders refined bloodlines and established reputations that extended beyond Kentucky, contributing to the town's growing recognition in regional markets. This specialization encouraged investment in land and livestock, reinforcing economic hierarchies and concentrating wealth among those able to participate in large-scale agricultural enterprises, shaping long-term patterns of inequality within the community. Legal institutions expanded their authority, addressing disputes over land claims, contracts, and inheritance, thereby stabilizing economic relationships and providing a framework for resolving conflicts in an increasingly complex society. Population growth continued steadily, driven by migration and natural increase, leading to expanded housing, services, and infrastructure, while also placing pressure on available resources and requiring more organized governance structures. By the 1810s, Lexington had firmly established itself as one of Kentucky's leading towns, balancing its agricultural foundation with emerging commercial and institutional roles